it's wonderful. It's wonderful to think that someone got paid to make something bad, because that means wherever I am in my thought process and in my career and in my ability to make things, I can still convince someone that I could do something, even if it comes out not that great.
Let's face it, plenty of big budget movies are terrible too.
And I mean, by no means, am I always writing about like the most elite literature. But the fact that I'm writing about like a Victorian poem while Joe is doing something so vastly different, I think really gives the book a nice kind of balance. Like,
I do like some good horror. I wrote about Lamb. I do love Icelandic movies, but I also wrote about Thirsty, the Icelandic gay vampire movie where a vampire is ripping off people's rubber penises for an hour and a half.
Do you see any parallels with that movie and queer horror as a theme?
It was a little harder to dig into that one.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Elly Blue, the vice president of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
This week, we welcome back one returning guest and one brand new first-time guest to the pod, Carlough and Gina Brandolino, co-authors of the brand new, terrifying book, Queer Horror.
We met because Gina had bought some zines that I was putting out called DSP's Classic Ghosties. It was a take on Penguin's classic book series, but these were Victorian ghost stories that were long out of print that I was like designing as individual zines because I thought that they deserved another life. And Gina is a sort of a classic horror person and bought them and really enjoyed them and reached out to me, and we talked about maybe doing a zine together. And it just happened to be, oh, there they are, the Classic Ghosties. Yeah. If you're only listening in, pop over to the video now. And so we started talking about maybe doing a zine together about our love of horror, and it happened to be 3 or 4 months before Pride Month, and I happened to be just very newly in the process of coming out, and we thought, wouldn't this be a great time to write about some gay ghosts?
Welcome to the great outdoors.
Here we are.
I mean, is there ever a bad time to write about gay ghosts?
No. The only thing I want to add to that story is that all of that happened in the like dark shadow of the pandemic. And so like literally there was not a lot of I don't know, like fellow feeling, like I wasn't really getting out and seeing my friends, and so it all happened long distance. I live in Michigan and Joe lives in Pennsylvania, and actually we still haven't physically met.
Whoa.
Never seen each other face to face.
Not in 3D. We often meet in 2D.
So. Success story.
Wow.
So you did start publishing zines together, yes. And then that led. How did the zines? What were the zines you published together, and how did they lead to this book?
Well, we did 2 queer horror zines, and then we also did. My favorite is the Halloween zine we did, which you think that Halloween horror zine like actually took much longer to get to than I thought it would, given how close horror and Halloween are. And then we also did a wintry horror zine that was about like sort of, cold horror. And then because Exorcist is one of my favorite movies and I could sucker Joe into it, we also did a zine in honor of the Exorcist's 50th birthday. And I think we both come at horror, from a place of identity. But I feel like the queer horror zines are the only place where that was sort of explicitly the topic. And otherwise, our queerness was just sort of seeping in through all the margins all the time in a less explicit way.
Absolutely. Yeah. We named the series Gina and Joe Talk About because it was sort of like the idea that Now, Gina teaches a lot of horror, and I am certainly talking about it all the time. But I don't know if I personally didn't identify as like an expert or a critic of horror. So it was more like we were kind of in conversation with ourselves about what we thought about horror movies and how we felt about them and what we pulled out of them to share with people. So the zines to me always were a little more conversational in tone than some of the stuff I've written. And then the second queer horror zine mostly came out of the fact that the first one was so popular. We've sold about 5,000 copies of the zine series total.
Wow.
And about half of that is just the first queer horror zine itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you knew you were onto something.
Yeah, we liked making it and we liked talking about it. And every person, I've gotten more feedback on those zines than most of them. So it seemed like people are really connecting with these zines. So let's continue on and talk about more horror. I think horror is having a really great moment right now. And it's exciting to be like someone who people want to talk to about horror movies.
Yeah, I mean, your timing could not have been better. Let's say that. You just happened to land
Culturally, yeah.
with the
Right.
Zeitgeist.
Yeah.
The Poltergeist with the Zeitgeist. You could do something with that.
The culture's like that.
Freebie. But so I'm guessing then that it was not scary to write this book.
Where did you get that idea?
I feel like I am 53 years old and I have been out more than half of that time. And to me, it's not a thing anymore. I don't live in a place where it's a thing, like I don't have a job where it's just who I am. And so I think to me, there were moments, was sort of like, it was scary in the way that sometimes therapy is scary. Where, there's an essay that I like a lot that I wrote almost last about Jekyll and Hyde that was about me coming out. And I mean, I dreaded writing that essay. It upset me to write that essay. I had to go through the whole coming out process again to write that essay. So I would say it wasn't exactly scary. It was dreadful. If I could use that word, it was dreadful. I guess the only other essay that brought that emotion to me that was explicitly about queerness was Pretty in Pink, which reminded me of, and it's sort of built subtly around, the difficulties of being a sort of strange girl, a tomboy kind of girl growing up in the 80s. Those were the scary ones to me. I also, there are two essays that just, that are about times when I've been my most terrified that don't really have anything explicitly to do with my queerness. And one is about a serial killer in my town. And that one is called The Summer of Dread. And the other one is about the two scenes in horror that most knocked me off my feet. And that one is called, what's that one called, Joe? Lost Girls. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I think, other than that, it was fun. It wasn't scary, but there were some places where I did sort of edge up to my own fear, and places where I edged up to play, sort of memories that were not comfortable. What about you, Joe?
I mean, for me, it was mostly just the fact that it's a book. That was sort of the scariest thing. My modus operandi has been as a publisher and a zine writer for the past 20-ish years. My partner and I run a Consonant Collective now, and we put out a lot of people's work. And so I'm pretty comfortable designing a zine and talking to someone about their writing, and Kay is a really good editor, so we sort of have that locked down. But trying to think about my own writing as a book was very daunting. And then it required, on my end, a ton of editing and self-editing to think about, what is my zine voice, which is me sort of talking to people with a lot of asides and poor grammar and just sort of chatty, nonstop talking. And then what is the voice that I want a book to have, which I wanted to be a little more polished. which was hard for me because I had to run it through a few different people to get there and multiple rewrites. So for me, writing a book is scary, and but the subject matter is something I'm thinking about all the time, so not so scary.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, I don't know if writing a book ever is not scary. Maybe you've reached that point, Joe Beal, but I've got quite a few to my name, and I still get I still get the heebie-jeebies over each one at some point or another in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Are there lessons from horror in us for us people who write books and publish books to overcome this fear? Yeah, deal with this fear.
That should be a new Microcosm zine. The horror of publishing.
Right. Do you know
how much they hate to publish?
Do you know any like horror expert authors that could write that?
I know a lot of writers actually.
Yeah.
If only we could find a publisher.
Right.
I mean,
we'll get it sorted.
I feel like there are some really there are some things in publishing that really do fill me with horror, and I feel like are like jump scares. One of them is when you have a version control project with a manuscript or version control problem.
Mm.
It's actually hard for me to think of anything scarier in life. And like literally losing all of these hours of hard creative work to like something as simple as like copying one file over another wrong.
Oh, yeah, that would be amazing.
This reminds me of you remember that old Indigo Girls song "Kid Fears," right? Like, man, why does nobody know? I feel like I'm always referencing this and nobody knows it. And usually I'm referencing it in class, and my students are like, "How old are you?" But there's a song about what wouldn't you trade everything in the world to have your kid fears back? To which I usually say no. But what you're talking, version control, maybe, yeah, not a kid fear,
That's a pretty boring adult fear right there.
Right, but real.
Yeah.
Right. Has happened. I mean, yeah, it's kind of one of the bigger things that can and does go wrong. So, yeah, very real in our case.
Well, if we published a book, it was the version that was intended and not some previous
Well, we'll find out.
unedited
Yeah,
version.
right. The true horror.
I guess
Now you've got me scared.
I can think of one moment of real fear while writing some of the book, though. This actually happened for the Exorcist scene.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, Gina was handling a lot of the like legitimate, serious writing about The Exorcist, and I was watching the prequels and sequels and TV shows and all of the like horrible junk media that came out because of The Exorcist. And in the middle of that, I got COVID. And it's like when you're watching a movie, it's like an hour and a half, maybe 2, and then you're out of it. But I was in the middle of the TV series, which is like a pure like 10 hours of The Exorcist.
And scary, really scary.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
And I had a fever that was so bad one night that I kept thinking that I worked for Hallmark in their exorcism department, where I had to go to exorcisms and report back to the card writers about what should be in the cards. Things like, you've possessed my heart and stuff like that. But it was so bad that I wrote Katie an email in the middle of the night being like, I think I have to quit. I was just 100% in that moment. It was terrible.
But then Joe made those cards. And, they were part of the zine pack, as I recall, or part of a rewards pack. Yeah, they were hilarious. I have sent them.
Horror comes great creativity sometimes.
I like that Elly and Joe Carlough have the same dreams or nightmares, I guess I would say, and they have this like that. Both of your nightmares are sort of bureaucratic in nature.
It's true. I totally have like bureaucratic nightmares.
Which
the scariest part was having a full-time job again.
Right. You're like, who tricked me into going back to work? Yeah, and Hallmark. So like Hallmark used to have all their creative offices here in Cleveland, and a bunch of my friends' parents worked there, and so like, and I knew people that like were Hallmark copywriters once upon a time. And I think honestly the bigger stress was like that they would get like laid off really without any sort of forewarning, and this is like the 80s and the like, but it is an interesting thing because now all the former Hallmark offices are like these incredible, you might appreciate it, creative studios where people have
Mhm.
open studios where you can like go and see like some of the best art in the city. And it's a really cool, fascinating thing. But yeah, you have to think about how that's like on the remnants of like the industry that was.
And
And
AI is probably writing the cards.
ooh, ouch.
Yeah.
Another nightmare for Elly.
For all of us, I think, on that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Robotically yours. All right, I have a question for you too. I would love to know about your process, because when you go from like a zine to a book, there's so many different ways to do it. Like sometimes you just like slap together the zine contents into an InDesign layout and write a new introduction and you're done. I don't think you guys did that. Can you talk a little bit about like how the book is different from the zines and like what went into your decisions and what went into your process?
Oh, sure. Gina, you want to start that one?
Well, I feel like one of the big changes is the ways that we sort of reconceived. It's not like the book is like the Halloween horror zine and the wintry horrors. Like we conceived of these new sort of units, is the teacher word I'll use. And I'm sure there's sections might be a better word, right? Like these sort of sections in the book that speak to different kinds of horror tropes, but then also tropes that sort of overlapped with our reactions to horror. And I think that to me was the best intervention. And I think, Joe, that was mostly you.
Well, that was us. That was us talking on the phone for a few hours.
True. Okay, we did talk, but I
outside.
think it was
Yeah.
your good idea.
For me, I would say I'm the kind of person who never really considers a piece of writing finished. I have essays that I wrote 20 years ago I'm still working on and republishing in different ways. So, for anyone who has read the zines, if they were to read this book, my essays are going to appear very different than they were in all the zines. I sort of radically changed some of them. Especially like, we had an introduction to each one of the zines. And so we were trying to make a book about horror as queer people. So maybe my introduction about being in a snail mail music video on Halloween wasn't the most appropriate thing for the book, but there was an idea in it that I wanted to pull out. So it was about like also kind of like, I think of it as almost like fishing in my old essays, like casting the line out and seeing if I can snag a few ideas that would become a more suitable essay for this project. And I don't know how you guys feel about this as the publisher, but I'm still not totally, convinced that these essays are done. So they might even show up in a different form sometime or other. Just saying.
Right. Yeah.
There's two English teacher sayings that I'll deploy right now. And one is that no writing is ever wasted. And the other is that no writing is ever done. So students don't want to hear either one.
But
I like that. I think that's good. I think it's like really good to be like, yeah. And obviously there's like definitely two schools of thought on this matter. I mean, I know a friend of mine who is a pretty successful writer professionally. I was like pretty shocked that he said that like when the book goes to print, revisions are done, it's perfect, there's zero mistakes, and not because there's actually zero mistakes, but because you stop thinking about it. And I'm like, I have never heard anybody have that healthy of a relationship with anything before. Usually you get the phone call like Joe emailing Katie in the middle of the night and being like, I think there are typos. We need to pull the plug. It's like, and it'll be like, is it too late to pull it from the printer? Or what have you. And or a lot of I guess it's like stage fright is natural, like that's part of it, but then you have to also think about it from the point of the like, what is the reader getting out of it, like why, like what is it showing them about horror that nothing else is, what is it showing them about like their own lack of perspective or like a perspective that they haven't seen mirrored elsewhere. Is this how you approached writing this book? Not a loaded question.
No right answer.
I mean, for me, I think it felt a little more selfish. A lot of the essays were sort of like digging really deeply into why I was connecting so incredibly close to an idea, which of course ends up being really unselfish, because then you spit that all out, you do all of that hard work, and then hopefully someone reads it who can also connect to it and maybe does some of that work through your essay with you, kind of. So, you know, I have an essay in there, The Forest is a Beautiful Fucking Nightmare, about a nightmare that I used to have when I was like 18 or 19, about these like creatures coming up out of the ground in like a wooded cabin that I was in, and me seeing them approaching the house as this like glittering mist came out around them. And I first wrote about it in a zine called Dark Nature in like 2019, or I mean 2009. So sort of a long time ago. But I revisited it, and the whole idea of the dream seemed really different to me now. And the whole idea of this nightmare, especially in the context of writing this book, seems really different. So that was one of the essays that I rewrote with like a bent towards this book that's about me and about horror and about my dreams. But I'm really hoping that someone reading it will be like, oh shit, I used to have this dream when I was young. Let me think about it again. Maybe there's more to plumb in it. Why did I keep dreaming that I was a unicorn? Oh, wait, I'm gay. Just
that might be it. Yeah.
For example.
just one idea a person could possibly have.
Right.
Maybe you're just really magical.
I know, and I do feel like when you haven't like kind of come to peace or terms with that yet, it does like like you find that in the weirdest places.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, the sidewalk is cracked. I'm gay.
Totally.
You know? You're just like, I better not tell anybody. Lest
I don't want to break my mother's back. Why am I so much like my mother? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I took away from your book, and there are so many deeper things to be taken away from your book, but one of the things I took away from it as someone who knows you well, Joe, Carlough, is that you watch a lot of really obscure horror movies and television shows. A lot. And you write about them generously in this book. And a lot of them seem like they're like really kind of bad, but like delightfully bad. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into that? And what's your process for like turning that into like...
I really do have endless patience for bad movies, Joe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of amazing.
How do you do it? Why do you do it? And like, what's your secret to like kind of processing it so other people can enjoy them without having to watch them?
And I need to interject a pre-question. Did your pursuit of watching intentionally known to you bad movies and bad television shows come before the trend to do that, or did you create that trend?
I definitely did not create it, but I was definitely in it, for a long time since I was a kid. I like to think of myself, I've tried to think about what I am. I don't have a career, right? So I've tried, the thing that I land on now is DIY enthusiast. I really like to make stuff myself. And I find watching big budget movies less interesting than watching really small budget movies. Mm-hmm. Because for me, a part of the fun of watching a movie, even a bad movie, is being like, wow, they had a budget of $2,000 and this scene looks so good. How did they do it? And you can watch the scene and sort of figure out how they did it.
Right.
So I just love when people make something. And sometimes that's what I'm enjoying the most about something, is like, this is so bad. There's something funny about how bad it is. Or maybe it's not even that funny that it's bad, but it got made.
We built this software from scratch to solve our own problems starting in 2001.
It's not only the reason for our survival, but the reason we've been a Publishers Weekly fastest growing publisher 3 years in a row.
Now we want to share it with you.
Join Working Lit and get back the agency to understand your publishing business, market and sell your books, and painlessly pay royalties.
Working Lit. Doing the math for publishers.
Visit workinglit.com to give it a try for free.
There are so few queer movies in it. It's right. Like, I don't know. We didn't like discuss this beforehand, that we weren't going to write about explicitly queer movies. But it just sort of kept happening that the experience we wanted to write about was about, I don't know, maybe this era before things were explicitly queer. maybe that's sort of the place we were coming from for this book.
Right. I like that. And I like, and I like that, I think for people like exploring a variety of things is like interesting. And I mean, I think that's like that's probably why the zines are so popular, is because it's like you're on the cutting edge and it's like interesting. People like to read interesting things, I'm told. But so like one thing I thought about when you said bad movies, and I would like your take on this, Gina. So like in the 80s, the Evil Dead was a movie that was like a great movie with no budget. Evil Dead 2 was the exact same movie remade with the exact same plot and nearly identical script. They were just like, let's make the movie again and like maybe we'll get it a little better this time. Like it wasn't like a sequel. And then and I watched both of these before Army of Darkness came out, which was like the bigger budget version of same. But like, it had an entirely new, it had like a professional script and budget and, production company and all that. And, and in many ways it was like the campiness of I mean, if we're going to get into contentious topics, I do think the second movie is the best one. But, so like, where is the magic in being able to do something like literally remaking the same movie and calling it number 2? And, take that question anywhere you want to take it.
I mean, as you were talking, like two things came to mind. One is like Night of the Living Dead. I mean, didn't they make that with $7 in a shoelace? And I mean, literally, I think that was it. They made everything up. I feel like that is also to a lesser extent, but still true of Halloween. That they did not have much to do with it. But the thing that it makes me think of most is just this past weekend, I'm working with a student who's working on these really weird horror stories from England in the sort of 1860s, maybe 1880s. And the one I read this weekend was called, I'm just not, wait, hold on. I'm not going to remember. By a guy called Arthur Machen. Oh, The Great God Pan. It's called The Great God Pan. And I mean, nobody knows the name of this story, not even me. Like, I did not know this story before the student brought it to my attention. It was just off the wall weird, in the same way that the movies that Joe watches is off the wall weird. And I feel like there's a something that my students and I talk about all the time when we're talking about horror. The best horror has this quality. It disrupts audience expectations. And I think horror that is not trying to bow to any sort of expectation that they're going to make money or, producers' wishes, or any horror that is absolutely unchained from any wishes about what it's going to do other than just be fucking awesome. That's going to be the best horror. And once you start getting a budget and a producer and expectations, it always sort of limits what you can do. And the best horror doesn't have that limiter. And in fact, I mean, if you think about, like, The Exorcist was famous for this. Like, that was the first representation of a truly creepy child, like a child doing that awful shit, like on screen. Think about the crucifix scene, but you can even go from there. And if you think about even more recently, Hereditary, or Midsummer, that producer or director in particular, I think, is really good at disrupting audience expectations, right? Just pulling the rug out from under the audience is, I think, the main thing that low budget stuff can do, because they don't have any expectations based on them.
I was also thinking about what Joe Carlough was saying about rewriting the same essay over and over and making it every time.
Stick with the first one.
Yeah, you've got versions and you've got an audience for all of them. So I don't know. I don't see anything wrong with that. That's you're just giving people more opportunities to tap in and then debate which one they like better. So you have a lot of media that you reference and write about in the book, as well as personal stories. Can you give us some recommendations for our listeners of anything they might not have heard of that you think that people who love queer horror or are queer and love horror might really enjoy?
I wrote really deeply about and glowingly about in the book was We're All Going to the World's Fair, which was Jane Schoenbrun's first movie, who recently did I Saw the TV Glow, which was a movie that I didn't connect with that well. But We're All Going to the World's Fair was one that, like, you know, I've watched like 6 or 7 times now, and I've really thought about, and I have like my own really deep theories about what's happening in it. And I really connect with it. And I think that's a movie that if you didn't like it, I would say maybe try to give it another chance. And if you haven't seen it, go into it knowing that it's not going to be as exciting as some movies, but there's a lot in it. And I want you to think about it, and I want you to write to me about it, and we can talk about it.
Awesome.
Also, I want to mention one more. We did have an essay about this in the book originally, and then it got cut. And everybody knows the Netflix sort of, I don't know what to call it, homage. It's not a version, but the Netflix sort of homage to it. It's Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, which definitely has queer themes and is one of the best horror stories that American literature brings to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Awesome. Thanks for the recommendations.
Mhm.
It's interesting. It's funny. I've never connected with horror, and I'm always really interested in knowing why, I guess, like, why horror, you know, like, because everyone has their own reasons, and they're always really good, interesting reasons. And I mean, I guess it's like a little bit hard to ask somebody, like, why do you like this thing you really like? But, like, how would you, not necessarily, like, you don't need to try to convert me to it, but, like, how would you explain, like, your passion for an interest in horror to somebody who, like, had, say, never heard of horror, never seen a horror movie?
I feel like I grew up in a lot of contexts where something that I found scary was happening, and everybody was acting like it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody was having what I considered to be an inappropriate reaction emotionally to what was in front of me. And I was right? And everybody else was sort of trying to sweep something under the table. And something that I have always liked about horror is that when you watch horror with somebody or discuss horror with somebody, by and large, you're all scared together, right? You're all surprised together. It is a great sort of aggregator of appropriate emotion. And, you know, every once in a while when I'm teaching my horror classes, you know, I have the student that's like, well, yeah, this didn't scare me. And I'm like, you know, this isn't a hot sauce eating contest. You know, like, and nobody cares if you're not scared. Obviously, this is supposed to scare you. Why don't you just give it the benefit of the doubt? And by and large, people do appropriately react to horror. And that is something I have always appreciated.
Good answer. I am in a noise band called Asshole Knife. And we make really abrasive, loud music. Lately, it's gotten a little more melodic and listenable. But it's been a few years now that we've been making this music, and it has felt so appropriate to me as a place for my anger to go, because I have a extremely difficult time connecting with my anger. So being able to sit in a room and have a few drinks and make god-awful noise with people that's meant to sound kind of bad is an easy way for me to conjure up some of my like bad feelings. Because I was raised in a way in which you were not really supposed to talk about your negative emotions. You weren't supposed to let them out. You know, you should assume that the people who are being mean to you want you to like them, and that's why they're being mean to you. And so it's your job to sort of like show them that they should like you. And you don't do that by telling them that what they're doing is wrong. And so I have long felt like horror is this sort of place where I can be like, you know, yeah, fuck that guy. He sucks. Kill him. and you get to watch, all of the worst people usually die first. And then the good people are usually the ones who don't die. And there's a way in which it feels almost like corrective to me. It's like this like corrective lens through which I can view the world. Like, right, the monster is actually doing the good work of getting rid of all the terrible people, and the good people usually get to live. I don't know, maybe that's somewhere in there. That's probably an essay for the second book. I should probably think about that one more before I say more about how much I want people to be eating.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure that was an advertisement for your previous book, Queer Affirmations.
Right.
Totally.
100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess that's the whole thing with all of it is, right. It's like you have to express yourself some which way, and you have to kind of, I mean, I know I do feel like the theme of this year and decade is like people's unresolved lessons they were taught in childhood and like them trying to twist their way through that, and it is kind of all around me all the time. But so I don't know. Yeah, I guess I always liked horror movies when I was like a small child and probably too young to have seen them, and then that like desensitized me to the horrors in my real life around me. And then I like became a big kid, and then I like have friends that now like direct and act in Hollywood and like do horror movies and like are in these like name brand productions, and I'm like, oh, okay, so like, but I can't tell if that followed me or if it was just like always hanging out with weirdos or like what that was. But, I see the appeal, and I would point out that my appeal is different from both of your appeals. And so I think that's like part of the strength of this book is it's like people are going to find and take from it what they're going to find and take from it.
Yeah.
So like, what has been the weirdest reaction that you've gotten in fan mail to the zines so far? Because I'm guessing you haven't yet gotten any fan mail to the book that is not yet published.
No,
They
not
could
to the
hurry
book.
up with the fan mail.
Our industry is run by billionaires and conglomerates.
At Microcosm, we wanted the freedom to independently sell our books, easily pay royalties, manage our inventory, and understand our business all in one place.
That's why we've been using our own software since 2001.
Now, we want to share it with you.
Working Lit is the only business success software that is created and owned 100% by publishers for publishers.
Join Working Lit and get the agency you need to help your business grow.
Visit workinglit.com to try it for free.
I don't exactly know if this counts as fan mail, but I had, it's weird to me. I teach, at a university, and it's weird to me that my mere presence in the classroom as a queer person matters so much to my students. Like I was like, I just, I feel old, I feel kind of out of date, but it seems like it really matters to them. And I had a student. So there's a comic book store, really great comic book store in town that sells our zine. And one of my students, went and bought, I think it was a Halloween zine, and said, "Oh, Gina, I saw your zine at Vault of Midnight," and plug for Vault of Midnight, mentioned it by name. And I bought it, and I said, knowing that she identifies as a lesbian, I was like, "Oh, did they have queer horror?" And she said, "No, they didn't have that one." And so next class, I brought her a copy of the original queer horror. And this student just graduated, and she wrote me a note after, and she said, "I cried all the way home when you gave me that zine, because I felt like you saw me and you know who I was." And I thought that was like, it was nice, but it was sort of unexpected, and for that reason weird, but it was meaningful. And I guess it just shows that, like Joe and I are like, at least I feel like in the zines, I was like always mouthing off, I was just like, I can mouth off about Alien for 10 minutes, no problem, right? But there's something that's ultimately really meaningful for students who are, for young people and maybe people in general who are sort of grappling with their own identity. most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would have been very hard to come out without reading such an incredible variety of people coming out and talking about their experiences and also what queerness means to them. Katie put out a book a few years ago called Spirit Box that was like poetry, like told through memes that she was creating. And one of them was "Queer isn't a question you never stop asking." And that line is like just on repeat in my head all the time. Like, when I think about writing essays over and over again, because it's just like, I'm not done yet. I'm not done with myself yet. There's something, there's a lot in here that I have to think about. And that feels like right. And I think the more people you have talking about their experiences, queer or not, I think is really good.
And it does seem like the opportunities for horror and queerness never stop evolving.
Yeah, they've been connected for a long time.
And
I did have one person who bought all the zines except Wintry Horrors and said in a note when she bought them, because there's nothing scary about winter. That might be one of the weirder things. I think that might be the weirdest thing I've heard yet about the zine.
That is weird.
Just to bring it back to the original question.
don't deny Winter's identity.
Right. I mean, I guess that's her opinion, and that's fine. That's valid.
Probably lives in Florida.
Right.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, like, do they live in like Siberia? Like,
Right, it's one or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Wow.
I wonder, have you seen any like change in queer discourse, queer horror movies at all, kind of in the last like 8 to 10 years as our politics have shifted? Like, how are these? What's the response? What's the change?
The change I was thinking of was mostly that, when I was younger, I wouldn't go to any horror conventions because they were like pretty aggressive. The energy at them was pretty aggressive. It was a pretty like white male space that was, the kind of place where there might be like fake testicles hanging off someone's truck out front, and just like not the sort of person who I usually have a lot in common with. But we went to a queer horror convention in Atlantic City a few years ago, or just a horror convention. I call it a queer horror convention because of how gay it was. It was just, I would say half the tablers had pride flags or trans flags, so wow. I think the horror community is sort of rapidly shifting, at least in my area. The East Coast is pretty queer friendly in general. But it has really felt to me that horror has long wanted queer people to like it, and queer people are finally really pulling it in and accepting it and being a part of it.
I feel like horror has always been a place where a significant amount of social commentary happens, and that has just escalated, in my opinion, since Get Out. I feel like Get Out was like this huge watershed moment where it became, it sort of all rose to the surface in a way that maybe we hadn't even seen before. And I don't think this essay made it into the book, but I write in a zine we didn't put out. I wrote about this movie called Sweetheart, which everybody slept on. Nobody knows this movie. And it has a monster that is a very white, giant reptilian asshole who attacks and sort of terrorizes the Black female character. And J.D. Dillard is the director, and he explicitly said, "That's Trump. I designed this monster based on Trump." Like, you're not hiding your hand, right, when you put it out there like that. And I feel like increasingly this is something we're seeing happen with movies. I feel like, if I am honest, since Midsummer, I have not been impressed by most horror movies. But we had a real run. We had a real good, sort of renaissance, and hopefully it will come back. And we'll get some good ones, with the exception of Sinners, which, is great. So
I saw a comic the other day that I think was in the New Yorker. I wish I could, if I find it, I'll let you guys know so you could give them attribution. But it was two people walking out of a movie theater, and on the marquee was a monster movie where the monster signifies grief. And the guy coming out of the theater goes, I really liked how the monster signified grief in this movie. I think that was just showing us that everyone has realized we've reached the point of oversaturation where it's like it's hard to even get good points across in horror movies at this moment because of how many are coming out and sort of like stuffing their themes down our throats.
And honestly, many of them are about grief, right? That like that is what that like a lot of Stephen King, the recent Stephen King that I've read with my students has been about illness and pandemic and, you know, sad deaths of children, you know, and I feel like that that is absolutely a sign of the times.
I think so too.
That is actually kind of what I was going to ask, is the way that themes have become increasingly heavy-handed in modern media is that it's like you can't just have an underlying like, oh, surprise, or even like twist endings seems kind of taboo. Like it kind of like now sort of all marketing is based around the fact of they're like, they did something new with this one, or it's one of those, or, you know, and so you almost have to sort of ruin it or not ruin it, but spoil it in the sense of in advance. So so it reaches the right audience who is not like repelled by it because they're like giant Trump fans. And then they go to see the movie and then they're like, wait a minute, this one is not for me. So like, do you feel like this heavy-handedness is watering down your genre?
That's a good question, Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I personally feel that we are constantly in like a sine wave moving up and down where, you know, every 20 years or so, the idea about what makes a good movie changes and the idea of what's popular in movies change. And I think we're in a swing right now of, my personal take is that we're in a swing of people feeling exhausted who are happy enough to be told something rather than having to really figure it out themselves. And that hopefully in a few years, we all sort of get a break and we like decide that intellectualism is cool again. And we get a little more subtle with our movies, and then we're all going to get tired of that and be like, God, why is everyone such a brainiac? And then we're going to start just like showing people the monster again. But that's just a casual observation.
I do feel like we in movies, especially, like all of the technology that has become available that allows us to manifest monsters in front of the screen is ultimately not helping the genre. Like, do you guys remember not even Aliens, but Alien? When all they would do would show us like the tiny little tail of the alien, right? Or you'd get a talon. Like, you know,
Scariest movie I've ever seen.
The whole guy in the
Really
suit.
scary.
So like, what kind of dope shit is that, right? But, you know, same thing with Jaws, which is having a birthday this year. You know, like they couldn't get the mechanized sharks to work. And so they used that music and we were all creeped out because we couldn't see the monster. And the monster that you can't see is always the worst monster because he's worse in your head, right? And so I feel like the ability to make a computerized sort of CGI'd up monster has not helped.
I mean, I feel like, like true in politics too, you know, like this behavior is now all out on the surface.
Yeah.
Nothing's hidden anymore. I don't know if one is better or worse, but there's a parallel there.
Yeah.
Right.
I think what's terrible is that, you know, the thing I just cannot figure out about politics now is like how, you know, I listen to Trump people talk and they think it's clear they think he's charismatic. And I'm like, what? You know, I just don't get it. And because he's absolutely not charismatic, but there's something going on there that clearly just doesn't compute in my mind. And if you think about like the Bushes, they weren't charismatic, you know, like you could say that even I can see that Trump is doing something weird that might be construed as charismatic. But, you know, like Ronald Reagan was probably not doing that, you know, so I feel like you're right about there just being something visible, right? Something ugly that is visible.
I mean, it's hard to say, you know, because you think about like the old Bond movies where James Bond is breaking into the lair of some supervillain, and he's just got this cadre of people working for him, and they all seem to not notice or not mind that their boss is the evil one.
Literally,
and oftentimes they get killed, and you sort of feel for them. They just seem like these dopey everyman people, and you know, it's just I don't know. I have spent zero time reading about sociology and trying to figure out why people act in the way they do. So I don't know if I could speak to that phenomenon, but for some reason, some people just seem to not think evil things are evil that I think are evil. And they seem to think the things that I like are evil. And I can't figure it out.
All right, well, go ahead, Joe. Maybe you can figure it out.
I was just going to say, I love that. So the weirder thing is that when Faith Harper and I did How to Be Accountable, the biggest shocker that I learned is that basically like all psychology is like actually Buddhism. And it's super duper weird that this is kind of like a plain secret, like the more you try to dig into like where did this come from. But, you know, and I think part of it is that it's not, I don't know, like what is charisma? Because what actually seems to be happening with like Ronald Reagan, at least George Bush too, to some degree George Bush 1, and Trump, is that they all are kind of like, you know, they feel authentic in a way that they're like, oh, that's like my like neighbor that's like, you know, I can kind of have a conversation with. And I think, you know, in a lot of those things, it wasn't like people came forward and were like, I really like the policies of these people, because in a lot of cases you're like, what is their platform? You know, or like
exactly,
they don't do the thing they say they're gonna do. You know, even Reagan, you know, did not. And so it's the thing where like they feel, and especially Trump, like feels authentic, whatever that might be. And I think that might be like the biggest parallel to like what makes a good horror movie, even if it has no budget.
I'm glad
somebody looks familiar, right? Is that what you mean? Sorry, Joe.
Yeah.
No, that's fine, because I was thinking the same thing, because I tried to watch one of the new Jurassic Park movies recently. Now, you know, Jurassic Park, wonderful movie, just fantastic movie. And I was watching one of the newer ones, and it's like, you know, the camera spends 4 minutes filming the Audi symbol on someone's car, and then they get out drinking a Pepsi, and they like smirk at the camera. And in my mind, I'm thinking, why is anyone watching this movie? You know, but there's me just being a snob, thinking that, you know, there's something inherently wrong about liking the things you like and being sold to by corporations. And there is, but people like it, you know, and so there's something that doesn't work there. Meanwhile, I'm watching all of these really bad movies and I truly like them. So there's something that I'm connecting to in them that other people aren't. And they're honestly not much better. They just, no one's paying them to put their stuff in them. So it's like, you know, they're both bad movies. One just has a big one, that doesn't. So what is it that we like about these things? I don't know.
Maybe the bad movies are like, you're imagining a secret sub-basement in the Comet Ping Pong restaurant where bad things are being done by Democratic politicians, and the new movies, they're blockbusters full of product placement, are like having Jeffrey Epstein get no consequences on your television.
Thank you for bringing it all back, Elly. Just bringing it all together.
That was great.
Them all up.
Wow. See, I'm just still hung up on the fact that like I haven't been able to go in a pool since 1983 when Jaws came out.
Yeah.
Because of that music. Yeah.
The music is a real problem. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's effective. And I love your Alien to Aliens parallel because I was like, I thought that one was like a suspense movie and this one is like an action movie and but yeah, I did love them both. Different
You
movies,
got all of them. I write about the Alien movies in an essay called Pretty in Pink. That's one of my favorites. And I feel like my coming out sort of traveled along the Alien path. Like Sigourney Weaver was right there for me in every movie. So Ellen Ripley, by the time we got to Alien Resurrection, I was fully out. My mom was known by that time,
Thanks, Sigourney Weaver.
It only took 4 sequels.
Well, on that note, we are just about out of time, but I would love to hear your parting thoughts for the audience. Anything that you would like to make sure to share.
And what you're going to do next.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, we are in the midst of putting together a sort of companion zine that goes along with the book that is sort of everything that didn't fit into the book. And so if you're really excited about the book, and we hope you like it, we really do, don't sleep on the zine, which will be coming out soon, I think.
Yeah, the zine's going to be really fun. I'm having a good time, like trying to think about the essays I didn't want for this book and why, and figuring out what I can do to make them feel better too. If I would just like to say to anyone who reads the book and likes it, that they can totally reach out to me. My email is on my website and stuff, and I'm super chatty. So I always like to talk about horror and what it means to people. And personally, I'm excited about our collective, Consonant Collective's doing a new project called VHS to Vinyl. We're making these bootleg soundtracks out of the VHS audio of movies. So you're not going to hear any parts of the songs that aren't in the movies. That feels like if you're reading our book, you should probably be listening to one of those records too, because they're like they go hand in hand. But I'm always working on a ton of stuff, so that's just the latest thing I'm thinking about.
Amazing. Well,
Nice.
Thank you both for your incredible book. This is, if you're tuning in partway through the episode, I don't know why you would be, because this is not on the radio, but this is Joe Carlough and Gina Brandolino talking about their book, Queer Horror, Fun and Freaky Perspectives on Macabre Media, which you can purchase for yourself and all your friends at microcosm.pub.
Shipping now.
Oh,
Shipping soon.
I meant
Wait.
that to sound spookier, but I guess I may or may not have. I don't know. Did
I took
sound
that as
spooky?
a slightly dubious statement about freight.
Oh, it's
shipping in 10 days.
more.
I guess
Yeah, that was better.
By the time you listen to this, it will probably already be available.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll have a copy of it.
Did we give Ellie more nightmares? Okay, then we've done our job.
Logistics.
I will personally write to you about all my nightmares in great detail. That will be your punishment.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
On Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.